You'd think, after the dust settled in that courtroom, after the gavel came down and sealed our strange, paperweight-fueled victory, that it would be over, that the war would end. I thought so. I truly did. I thought I could finally breathe, finally mourn the son I'd lost without the specter of his legal vengeance hanging over me. I thought Clara was safe, but I was a fool, a tired, old fool. Peace, it turns out, is just the quiet moment between battles, and the next attack didn't come from where I expected. It didn't come from Jessica, though her hatred was a radioactive cloud you could almost see hanging over the city. No, this new threat was quieter, deadlier. It came from within the very fortress I thought was secure, the past. And it was delivered by a ghost. It started a month after the court victory. The weather had turned, a bitter autumn wind whipping dead leaves against my window panes, a constant, scraping whisper. I was trying to read, but my mind kept wandering back to Kyle. Not the man he became, but the boy. The one who clutched that stupid snowman paperweight like it was a treasure. The grief was changing, losing its sharp, angry edges and becoming a dull, constant ache. I was just starting to learn how to live with it when the doorbell rang. It was a young man, maybe late 20s, dressed in a cheap, ill-fitting suit that was no match for the biting wind. He looked nervous, shifting his weight from foot to foot, his eyes darting up and down the street. "Mr. Evans?" he asked, his voice a reedy tremor. "Who's asking?" I said, my guard immediately up. Reporters had finally stopped camping on my doorstep, but you could never be too careful. "My name is Leo," he said, swallowing hard. "Leo Finney. I was a junior analyst at your son's firm, at Kitech." The name was a punch to the gut. Kitech. Kyle's pride and joy, his empire, the source of so much of his wealth and his arrogance. This boy, Leo, looked like a scared rabbit. What could he possibly want? "I'm not giving any interviews," I said, starting to close the door. "It's not an interview," he said quickly, his voice rising in panic. It's about the books. Kitech's books. There are things you need to know, things that affect you and your daughter." That got my attention. I opened the door a little wider. "What things?" He looked over his shoulder again, a gesture so full of paranoia it was contagious. "Please, Mr. Evans, can I come in? It's not safe to talk out here." Against my better judgment, I let him in. He stood shivering in my foyer, clutching a worn leather satchel to his chest like a shield. I led him to the study, the same room where it received the fateful codicil. His eyes immediately landed on the paperweight, sitting in its place of dishonor on my desk. He stared at it, a strange, knowing look on his face. "You know what that is?" I asked, my voice harder than I intended. "Everyone at the office knew," Leo said softly, almost with a kind of reverence. "The snowman. That's what Mr. Evans called it. He kept it on his desk. He'd look at it sometimes and smile. It was creepy. We all thought it was some kind of inside joke, a trophy from a deal he'd crushed. We had no idea." He trailed off, realizing he was rambling. "Sit," I commanded, pointing to the chair opposite my desk. "What is this about, Mr. Finney? Be quick." He sat on the edge of the seat, placing the satchel on his knees. He took a deep, shaky breath. "Mr. Evans, after your son passed, the company was thrown into chaos. Jessica, Mrs. Evans, she took over as interim CEO. She brought in her own people, a new CFO, a guy named Sterling. The lawyer," I interrupted, my blood running cold. "The same," Leo nodded. "He's not just a lawyer, sir. He's a fixer. And they're cleaning house. They're systematically dismantling the company, selling off assets, cooking the books to make it look like Kitech was in much worse financial shape than it actually was." I felt a familiar, cold knot tightening in my stomach. "Why are you telling me this? I have nothing to do with Kitech." "But you do, sir," Leo insisted, his eyes wide and earnest. "All your daughter does. 3 you." He leaned forward, his voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "They're creating a narrative. They're going to claim that Kitech was a house of cards, that it was massively over-leveraged, that the value of the estate you're supposed to pass to your daughter is a fraction of what was reported. They're going to hide Kyle's money, sir. They're going to make it disappear before it can ever get to Clara." The room seemed to tilt. It was the same war, just a new battlefield. Kyle's codicil had been a direct assault. This was a siege, a slow, methodical poisoning of the well. Jessica wasn't just accepting defeat, she was burning the village so no one else could have it. "How?" I asked, my voice a dry croak. "How are they doing it?" Leo unzipped his satchel and pulled out a thick manila folder. His hands were trembling. "I couldn't just stand by. It's fraud. Plain and simple." I copied files, server logs, encrypted emails, transfer records. They're using a series of shell companies, subsidiaries in the Caymans that didn't exist 6 months ago. They're funneling money out of Kitech's R&D and operational funds into these black holes. He slid the folder across the desk to me. It felt heavy, toxic. "They're calling it Project Phoenix. The idea is to strip the company bare, declare bankruptcy for the hollowed-out shell, and then have the assets miraculously reappear in a new corporate entity, owned entirely by Jessica and Sterling." I stared at the folder. This wasn't just about greed anymore. This was about annihilation. Jessica wouldn't be satisfied with just keeping Clara from getting Kyle's money. She wanted to ensure there was no money to get. She wanted to prove that Kyle's entire world, the world he chose over his family, was hers to control, to unmake. "Why you?" I asked, looking hard at Leo. "Why risk your career, your freedom, probably, by stealing these documents?" He looked down at his hands. "I admired your son, Mr. Evans. He was a brilliant, demanding, ruthless bastard. But he built something. It was real. What she's doing, it's a desecration. It's wrong." And he hesitated, his cheeks flushing. "And they fired me. This morning. Sterling called me in, said my position was redundant. They gave me a pathetic severance package and a non-disclosure agreement so tight it would have gagged a saint. They knew I was asking too many questions. Taking this," he nodded at the folder, "was my severance package." I believed him. The fear in his eyes was too real, the indignation too raw. He was a whistleblower, a kid who'd stumbled into a den of wolves and barely escaped with his skin and his conscience intact. After he left, with a promise of silence and a hefty sum of cash from me for his trouble, a retainer for his future testimony, I told myself. I sat alone with the folder. I didn't open it immediately. I was afraid of what was inside. The scale of it was overwhelming. This was corporate warfare, a language of shell companies and offshore accounts I didn't speak. I was just an old man with a lawyer and a broken heart. I called Ben. He came over immediately, his face grim as I relayed Leo's story. He opened the folder and spent an hour poring over the documents, his expression growing darker with every page. "He's not wrong, Barry," Ben said finally, taking off his glasses and rubbing his eyes. This is sophisticated fraud. If even half of this is true, Jessica and Sterling are committing crimes that could put them away for a very long time. But proving it, that's the problem. This," he tapped the folder, "is a road map, but it's not enough for a court. We need a guide. We need someone who can interpret this, someone who can follow the money." "Who?" I asked, feeling hopeless. "We need a forensic accountant," Ben said. "A bloodhound. And I know just the person. But she's expensive, and she's difficult." Her name was Dr. Anya Sharma. She was a former federal investigator who now ran her own boutique firm, specializing in untangling the kind of financial knots that most people thought were permanently tied. Getting an appointment was like trying to get an audience with the Pope. Ben had to call in a lifetime of favors. Her office was a sterile, modern space in a downtown high-rise, all white surfaces and cool blue lighting. There were no personal touches, no family photos, no diplomas on the wall. It was a room designed for one thing: cold, hard analysis. Dr. Sharma matched her environment. She was a woman in her late 40s, with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing and a severe black bob that looked as sharp as a blade. She didn't offer us coffee. "Crawford," she said by way of greeting, her voice clipped and precise. "This is the Evans matter." She didn't wait for an answer, her eyes already scanning me, assessing, categorizing. The paperweight patriarch. I flinched. So, the story had reached even here. "We have a situation, Anya," Ben said, placing the folder on her pristine glass desk. "We believe the estate of Kyle Evans is being systematically looted by the widow and her lawyer, Dr. Sharma didn't touch the folder. She simply looked at it. "Belief is not evidence. What do you have?" For the next 20 minutes, Ben walked her through the highlights of Leah's documents. She listened without a single interruption, her face an impassive mask. When he finished, she was silent for a full minute, her fingers steepled under her chin. "Project Phoenix," she said, almost to herself. Amateurish name. The methodology, however, is not. This Sterling knows what Hayes doing. The Cayman entities, the transfer layers, it's a classic siphon, but well executed. She finally picked up the folder, flipping through it with a speed that was dizzying. "Your source?" "The analyst. Hayes credible?" "I believe so," I said, finding my voice. "Belief is not evidence," she repeated, her eyes flicking to me. "But this is a start. It gives me a scent." She closed the folder and looked directly at me. "Mr. Evans, you need to understand what you are asking for. If I take this case, I will follow the evidence. Wherever it leads, it may lead to uncomfortable truths about your son's business practices prior to his death. It may lead to places you do not want to go. My loyalty is to the numbers, not to your family's sentiment. Do you understand?" I understood. She was warning me that Kyle might not have been a saint either, that this river of poison might have started with him. I nodded, my throat tight. "I understand. Find the truth." "Very well," she said. "My retainer is $50,000. You'll need full access to all of your son's financial records that you can legally obtain, and the complete cooperation of your source. I will report my findings only to Mr. Crawford. I do not do hand-holding. Are we clear?" We were clear. I wrote the check. It felt like I was buying a ticket to the third ring of hell. The wait for Dr. Sharma's findings was agony. It was worse than waiting for the will reading, worse than waiting for the court date. This was a silent, invisible war happening in spreadsheets and server logs, and I was utterly powerless. Clara knew something was wrong. I couldn't tell her the details, not yet, not when the threat was so vague and monstrous. I just told her Jessica was causing more trouble, and that Ben and I were handling it. The whirring in her eyes was a constant reproach. I tried to live a normal life. I went to the grocery store. I paid my bills. I watched the leaves fall from the oak tree in my backyard. But my mind was always in that sterile office with Dr. Sharma, chasing ghosts in the machine. 3 weeks after we hired her, Ben called. His voice was taut, strained. "Barry, you need to come to my office, now. Anya is here. She's found something." I drove there with a lead weight in my chest. Ben's office felt different this time, charged with the grim energy. Dr. Sharma was there, sitting perfectly still, a single sheet of paper in her hand. She didn't greet me. "Tell him," Ben said, his face pale. Dr. Sharma looked at me, her expression unreadable. "The money trail is confirmed. Project Phoenix is real. Jessica Evans and Arthur Sterling are embezzling no less than $40 million from Kitech and its subsidiaries." 40 million. The number was so large it was meaningless. It was just a sound. But that's not the primary revelation, she continued, her voice cool and detached. Following the money led me to something else. A series of encrypted, off-book transactions originating from your son's personal accounts, dating back 5 years. My heart stalled. What kind of transactions? Regular, substantial payments, she said, her eyes locked on mine. $50,000 quarterly. Always in cash, always withdrawn by him personally. The trail goes cold after that. No record of who it was going to. It was his one truly secret expense. My mind raced. A mistress. Blackmail. Another secret family. The possibilities were sordid and terrifying. You have no idea where it was going. Not from the financial records, no, she said. Then she placed the single sheet of paper on Ben's desk and slid it towards me. It was a photocopy of a page from a personal calendar, the kind with a week at a glance. Kyle's handwriting was unmistakable, sharp, aggressive slashes of ink. This, however, was recovered from a cloud server backup your source, Mr. Finney, didn't even know he had access to. It's from your son's private digital calendar. I looked down. The page was from a week in March, 4 years ago. There were meetings labeled VC pitch, board lunch, and then, on a Tuesday, a 2-hour block from 2 o'clock to 4 p.m. It was simply labeled Senior DI, and below it, in smaller letters, an address in a part of the city I hadn't been to in decades. An industrial area, now mostly abandoned. Senior DI, I read aloud, my voice hollow. What does that mean? The address is for a defunct manufacturing plant, Dr. Sharma said. It was condemned 2 years ago. As for the initials, I cannot say for certain. But I could. As I stared at those 2 letters, Senior, a memory, long buried and covered in the dust of years, stirred in the deepest, darkest part of my mind. It was a name I hadn't heard, hadn't allowed myself to think about in over 30 years. A name that belonged to a ghost who was supposed to stay dead. My blood ran cold. My hands began to shake so badly I had to put the paper down. Barry, Ben asked, his voice full of concern. What is it? Do you know what that means? I looked up at him. Then the impassive Dr. Sharma. The room felt like it was closing in, the air too thick to breathe. SR, I whispered, the words tasting like ash and old poison. Samuel Riggs. Ben's face went blank for a moment, and then understanding dawned, followed by pure dread. Oh, my God. Barry, no. Who is Samuel Riggs? Sharma asked, her clinical curiosity piqued. I couldn't answer. I could only see the past, rushing back at me in a sickening wave. Samuel Riggs, the man who had tried to destroy our family once before. The man whose name was forbidden in our house. The man who had vanished, and who we had all prayed was gone for good. And my son, my successful, powerful son, had been meeting him. For years. Paying him. Quarterly. Kyle's final, devastating secret wasn't in his will. It was in his calendar. And it was a secret that threatened to unearth a horror I had spent a lifetime trying to forget. The war for the future was over. The war for the past had just begun. And this time, the enemy wasn't just greedy. He was a ghost who knew all our sins. The name Samuel Riggs hung in the air of Ben's office like a poison gas. For a long moment, nobody spoke. Ben looked as if he'd seen a ghost, his face the color of old parchment. Dr. Sharma, ever the detached scientist, simply observed our reactions, filing them away as data. Who is Samuel Riggs? She repeated, her voice cutting through the thick silence. It was Ben who answered, his voice a hoarse whisper. A ghost. A man who should be dead. He looked at me, his eyes begging me to contradict him, to tell him it was a different senior, a coincidence. I couldn't. The address, the initials, the secret payment. It was a lock clicking open in a door it sealed shut in my mind decades ago. My legs felt weak. I stumbled back and collapsed into Ben's warm client chair. The leather groaned under my weight, a sound of protest. "Barry," Ben said, leaning forward on his desk. "It can't be. It can't be him. He disappeared. After the trial he just vanished." "The trial, Dr. Sharma interjected, her eyebrow arched. "This is relevant. Context is data." I closed my eyes. The past wasn't just rushing back, it was drowning me. I could smell the stale cigarette smoke and cheap coffee of the courthouse hallway. I could feel the crushing weight of the scandal, the way people looked at us, the whispers that followed Eleanor for years. 35 years ago, I began, the words feeling like shards of glass in my throat. I was a junior partner at a manufacturing firm, Evans and Crow. Sam Riggs was our head of procurement. He was charismatic, a backslapper, a deal-maker. Everyone liked him, especially my partner, Thomas Crow. I took a shaky breath. We landed a massive government contract, the biggest in the firm's history. It was going to set us up for life, but there were problems. Cost overruns, delays. We were bleeding money. Thomas was frantic. Then the auditors came. They found discrepancies, invoices for materials that were never delivered, payments to subcontractors that didn't exist. It was a shell game, a massive embezzlement scheme. I opened my eyes and looked at Dr. Sharma. The money was traced back to Sam Riggs. Had been skimming for years, but this contract was so big, he got greedy, and he got sloppy. When the authorities closed in, he pointed the finger at Thomas Crow. He said Thomas was the mastermind, that he was just following orders. He had forged documents, faked signatures. It was his word against Thomas. The memory was vivid, painful. Thomas was a good man, a bit naive, too trusting, but a good man. He was destroyed. The scandal his wife left him. His health failed. He stood trial. And even though the evidence was flimsy, the doubt was enough. The case ended in a mistrial, but the damage was done. The company was ruined. Thomas died of a heart attack less than a year later, a broken man. "And Riggs, Dr. Sharma asked, her voice still neutral. "He cut a deal," I said, the old anger simmering in my gut. "He testified against Thomas in exchange for immunity. He walked away scot-free. But the community, the industry, they knew. He was a pariah. He couldn't get a job. He was threatened. His house was vandalized. A few months after the mistrial, he just disappeared, packed a bag and vanished. Most people assumed he'd started a new life under a new name somewhere. I prayed he was dead." The office was silent again, save for the faint ticking of the antique clock on Ben's wall. "And the DI. On the calendar, Dr. Sharma pressed. I had been turning that over in my mind, trying to fit the pieces together. I don't know for sure, but back then, during the scandal, Riggs used to hang out at a dive bar called the Dry Dock. Everyone called it the DI, the Dirty Irons. It was a place for sailors, dock workers, and people who didn't want to be found." Ben slammed his hand on the desk. "God damn it, Kyle. What did you do?" That was the question, wasn't it? The multi-million-dollar question. Why was my son years later making secret, quarterly cash payments to the man who had destroyed my business partner and nearly destroyed our family? "Blackmail," I said, the word leaving a bitter taste in my mouth. "It has to be blackmail." Riggs came back. He sniffed out Kyle's success, and he found a way to leech onto him. But for what? What did he have on him, Dr. Sharma leaned forward, a glint of intense focus in her eyes. "The what is the leverage? It is the key to this entire secondary structure. Mr. Crawford, we need to find Samuel Riggs. Immediately. He is no longer a ghost, he is an active variable in this equation." "How?" I asked, feeling hopeless. "If Hay's been in the wine for 30 years, how do we find him now?" "He left a trail," she said, tapping the photocopied calendar page. "He met with your son regularly. That means he was local, or at least accessible. The payments were in cash, which is untraceable, but the pattern is not. Your son withdrew the cash. That means there is a bank record for every withdrawal. We can trace his movements on those days. Security cameras, toll road data, if he used a credit card for gas or lunch. We can build a pattern. We can find him. It sounded like something from a spy movie, but the look on her face said it was not only possible, it was inevitable. Do it, I said, my voice firming with a new grim purpose. The fight for Kyle's money felt trivial now. This was a fight for his soul, for the truth of my own family. Find him. Whatever it costs, Doctor. Sharma nodded, a predator on the scent. I will require an additional retainer. The resources for this kind of locate operation are significant. I didn't care. I would have given her every last dollar I had. The need to know, to understand this final, terrible secret, was an all-consuming fire. The next week was a special kind of hell. Knowing that Dr. Sharma and her team of digital bloodhounds were out there, piecing together Kyle's secret life, left me jumping at every sound. I was paranoid. I started looking over my shoulder in the grocery store. Every strange car that drove down my street felt like a threat. The past was no longer the past, it was a stalker, and it was closing in. I couldn't tell Clara. How could I? Your brother, who already left us insulting Will, was also being blackmailed by the man who destroyed our family decades before you were born. It would shatter her. The image of her brother, the golden boy, was already tarnished. This would reduce it to dust. I spent my days wandering the empty rooms of my house, trapped with the ghosts of my wife, my partner Thomas, and now, the spectre of Samuel Riggs. I found myself standing in front of old photo albums, pulling out pictures from that time. There was one of me, Thomas, and Eleanor at a company picnic, just months before the scandal broke. We were all smiling, so young, so oblivious to the cliff we were about to drive over. Thomas had his arm around my shoulder. He looked happy. I felt a wave of guilt so powerful it nearly brought me to my knees. I had survived. My family had survived. Thomas had lost everything. And now, it seemed, his tormentor had come for my son. Ben called me every day with updates from Dr. Sharma. They were technical, dry, but I hung on every word. She's mapped 12 separate cash withdrawals over 3 years, Ben reported one afternoon. All from the same bank branch downtown. She's subpoenaing the security footage for those dates, cross-referencing with the DMV database for vehicles in the area. Another day, she's got a pattern. On withdrawal days, Kyle almost always used his credit card at a gas station off the I-5, north of the city. Then, his phone's location data shows him traveling to the industrial area where the dry dock bar is or was. The bar burned down 10 years ago, but the area is still a wasteland. It was like watching a police investigation unfold in real time, with my dead son as the subject. Each new piece of information felt like a violation, but I couldn't look away. Then, 8 days after we'd hired her, Dr. Sharma called an emergency meeting in Ben's office. This time, she had a tablet with her. Her expression was, if possible, even more severe than usual. We found him, she said without preamble, powering on the tablet. Samuel Riggs. Hayes living under the name Samuel Rogers. He has a rented room above an auto body shop in the same industrial quadrant. Hayes been there for at least 5 years. She showed us a series of grainy, wrong lens photographs on the tablet. They showed a man in his late 60s, maybe early 70s. He was gaunt, with a stoop to his shoulders, dressed in stained work pants and a faded flannel shirt. His hair was thin and grey, his face a roadmap of hard living. But despite the years and the hardship, I recognized him. The sly, calculating eyes were the same. The ghost had a face. My heart hammered against my ribs. Seeing him there, real and tangible, was more terrifying than any abstract concept. Have you approached him? Ben asked, his voice tense. No, doctor, Sharma said. Surveillance only. He leaves his room infrequently. He buys groceries at a corner market. He spends a lot of time at a different bar now, a place called Harbor Lights, a few blocks from his room. It's the same clientele as the old dry dock. She swiped to another image. It was a clearer photo, taken from a different angle. It showed Riggs talking to another man outside the auto body shop. The other man was younger, bigger, with a scowling, brutish face and a shaved head. He had the look of a hired fist. Who is that? I asked. Unknown. But he appears to be an associate. He visits Riggs regularly. We're running his image through facial recognition now. The pieces were falling into a horrifying picture. Riggs wasn't just a lone wolf. He had protection. This was organized. What's the next move? I asked, my mouth dry. Doctor. Sharma looked from me to Ben and back again. The next move is yours. We have located the asset. You can choose to confront him. You can choose to go to the authorities with the financial fraud and include this as a related matter. Or you can walk away. But you should know, she added, her gaze locking onto mine. The last cash withdrawal from your son's account was 3 days before his death. The pattern suggests another payment was due. Riggs has not been paid. He will be getting desperate. A desperate man is an unpredictable variable. The implication was clear. The blackmail had died with Kyle. The threat was still very much alive. And if Riggs was desperate for money, who would he turn to next? He knew our family's secrets. He knew our weaknesses. I knew then that walking away wasn't an option. I had to face him. I had to look the ghost in the eye and find out what hold he had over my son. I'll talk to him, I said, the decision solidifying inside me. Barry, no. Ben said, aghast. That's insane. You can't go alone. He's a criminal. He has that thug with him. I have to, Ben, I said, my voice surprisingly steady. This is between him and me. It always has been. He destroyed one generation of my family. I won't let him destroy the next. Then in coming with you, Ben insisted. No, I said firmly. You're a lawyer. You're a witness. This needs to be unofficial. If something goes wrong, I need you on the outside clean. We argued for another 10 minutes, but my mind was made up. Dr. Sharma, typically, offered no opinion on the safety of the plan, only the logistics. He is most predictable in the evenings, she said. Between 7 and 9 p.m., he is at the Harbor Lights bar. It is a public place. It is your best opportunity for a controlled interaction. And so it was set. The following evening, I would go to the Harbor Lights bar and confront Samuel Riggs. The night before, I didn't sleep. I sat in my study, staring at the paperweight. It seemed so trivial now, a symbol of a petty squabble compared to the abyss I was about to peer into. I thought about Kyle. What had he felt, all those years, handing over cash to this vulture? Was he scared? Ashamed? Had he tried to stop? Is that why the payments were so regular, to keep the secret buried? The next day, I moved through my routines like an automaton. I told Clara I wasn't feeling well and wouldn't be taking her calls. I couldn't bear the sound of her voice, not with what I was about to do. As evening fell, I dressed in plain, dark clothes. I didn't know why it felt like what you did when you were going to meet a spy or a criminal. The drive to the industrial waterfront was a descent into another world. The sleek skyscrapers of downtown gave way to decaying warehouses, chain-link fences topped with razor wire, and the salty, rotten smell of the sea. The Harbor Lights bar was exactly what I expected, a low-slung, windowless building with a flickering neon sign in the shape of anchor, paint peeling from its walls. My hands were slick with sweat on the steering wheel. I parked a block away, under a burned-out street lamp, and sat for a moment, gathering my courage. I was an old man. What was I doing here? This was a place for harder men than me. But I thought of Clara. I thought of Kyle. And I got out of the car. The inside of the bar was a cave, thick with the smell of stale beer, cigarette smoke, and despair. A handful of grizzled men hunched over their drinks at the bar, not talking. A few more were scattered in booths along the wall. The lighting was dim, the air hazy. It took a moment for my eyes to adjust. And then I saw him. Samuel Riggs. He was sitting alone in a booth in the back corner, a half-empty glass of amber liquid in front of him. He looked smaller in person, shrunken. But the moment I saw him, the years fell away, and all I could feel was the old, hot hatred. I walked towards him. My footsteps sounded loud on the sticky floor. He didn't look up until I was standing right over his table. His eyes, those same cunning, reptilian eyes, lifted from his drink and focused on me. There was a long, slow moment of confusion. Then recognition dawned. It wasn't fear I saw in his face. It was something else, amusement. A slow, nasty smile spread across his thin lips. "Well, I'll be damned," he said, his voice a dry rasp, like stones grinding together. He hadn't lost his accent, the working-class drawl of the docks. "Barry Evans. In the flesh. I heard you were still kicking." He gestured with his glass to the seat opposite him. "Have a seat. Buy you a drink. For old time's sake." I remained standing, my hands clenched into fists at my sides. "We're not here for old time's sake, Riggs." "Sam," he corrected me, his smile not fading. "We're old friends, Barry. We can use first names." He took a slow sip of his drink. "I was sorry to hear about your boy, Kyle. A real tragedy. He was a good kid. A real good kid. Always looked out for me." The way he said it, the proprietary tone, made my skin crawl. "Looked out for you? Is that what you call it? Blackmail?" His smile widened, revealing yellowed teeth. "Blackmail. That's an ugly word, Barry. We had an arrangement. A business arrangement. He helped me out in my retirement. I helped him out with his peace of mind." "Help him with what?" I demanded, my voice low and shaking with rage. "What did you have on him?" Riggs leaned back in his booth, assessing me. He seemed to be enjoying this. "Why don't you sit down, Barry? You're making a scene. People are starting to look." I glanced around. A few of the men at the bar were indeed watching us with dull curiosity. I slowly, reluctantly, slid into the booth opposite him. The vinyl seat was cracked and cold. "What did you have on, my son?" I repeated, my voice a deadly whisper. Riggs studied me for a long moment, his head cocked to the side. "You really don't know, do you? He never told you." He let out a low, wheezing chuckle. "That boy. He was always so good at keeping secrets. Just like his old man." "What is that supposed to mean?" "It means," Riggs said, leaning forward across the table, his breath smelling of whiskey and decay, "that the apple doesn't fall far from the tree. You covered your tracks, Barry. I'll give you that. You were always the smart one. Smarter than poor old Thomas Crow. That's for damn sure." A cold dread began to creep up my spine. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about the Evans and Crow embezzlement," he said, his eyes gleaming in the dim light. "You think I was the mastermind? You think I had the brains or the balls to pull that off alone? I was the fall guy, Barry. The patsy. The plan was always yours." The world stopped. The noise of the bar faded into a distant, muffled roar. I could only hear the blood pounding in my ears. "You're a liar." "Am I?" he said softly, smugly. "Who do you think gave me the idea? Who showed me how to structure the phantom invoices? Who knew the government contract inside and out? Every loophole, every place to hide the overruns. It was you, Barry. You were the architect. I was just the foreman." "No," I whispered, my throat constricting. "That's not true." "It is true," he hissed, his face now inches from mine. "And when it all went to shit, you were the one who cut the deal. You gave the dough me. You fed them the evidence against me and against Thomas. You walked away clean, with your reputation barely scuffed, while Thomas died and I was run out of town. You built your new life on our graves. I felt like I was going to be sick. It was a nightmare. It was his word against mine. A desperate lie from a desperate man. But the conviction in his eyes, the sheer, venomous certainty, was terrifying. Kyle, I stammered. What does this have to do with Kyle? Everything, Riggs said, slamming his hand on the table, making his glass jump. He found out. I don't know how, but he dug it up. He came to me, years ago, full of piss and vinegar, threatening to expose me for what I did to his Uncle Thomas. Riggs laughed, a harsh, ugly sound. So I told him the truth. I told him what his saintly father really was. I showed him the proof. What proof? I demanded, my heart feeling like it was going to explode. Enough, Riggs said, leaning back again, his moment of anger passing, replaced by that infuriating calm. Enough to make him understand. He saw it, clear as day. He knew that if the truth ever came out, your perfect family, your legacy, it would all be ashes. So we made our arrangement. He paid for my silence, and I kept his daddy's dirty little secret safe. He was protecting you, Barry. All these years, that boy was protecting you. I stared at him, utterly destroyed. The room was spinning. It couldn't be true. It was a lie, a monstrous, twisted lie designed to torment me. But a small, cold voice in the back of my mind, the voice I had silenced for 35 years, whispered that it wasn't. I remembered the pressure, the fear of losing everything. I remembered the tempting, dark thoughts that had flickered through my mind during those desperate times. Had I said something to Riggs? Had I, in a moment of weakness, planted a seed? I didn't know. The past was a fog, but Kyle had believed it. He had believed this monster, and he had spent years, and a fortune, paying him to keep this poison buried. He hadn't been the blackmailed victim, he had been the protector. The paperweight, the condescending, was it all a reaction to this? To the burden of knowing this terrible secret about his father? The revelation was more devastating than any will, any codicil, any financial fraud. My son had died thinking I was a fraud and a coward who had destroyed an innocent man. I must have looked as shattered as I felt, because Riggs' smile returned, full of vile satisfaction. So you see, Barry, we're partners, you and me. We always have been. And now, with Kyle gone, the arrangement needs to continue. The quarterly payments. I think, with inflation, 100,000 seems more fair. Don't you? I looked at him, this pathetic, venomous creature, and a pure, undiluted hatred such as I had never known filled me. He had taken my past, he had corrupted my son, and now he wanted to claim my future. I stood up, my body trembling with a violence I could barely contain. You'll get nothing from me, I said, my voice a low, raw growl. His smile vanished. That would be a mistake, Barry. A very, very big mistake. You've kept your secret for a long time, but I'm not a young man. I have nothing to lose. What do you think Clara would say? Or that nice son-in-law of yours? What would the world say about the great Barry Evans? I didn't answer him. I turned and walked away, my legs carrying me on autopilot through the bar and out into the cold night air. I stumbled to my car, fell into the driver's seat, and collapsed over the steering wheel, gasping for breath. The ghost had just returned. He had brought a truth with him that had the power to destroy everything I had left. My son's final secret wasn't a crime he had committed. It was a crime he believed I had committed. And as I sat there in the dark, the weight of that belief felt like a sentence of death. I don't know how long I sat in that car, outside that hellish borough, with Samuel Riggs' poison still echoing in my ears. He was protecting you, Barry. The drive home was a blur. I walked into my dark, silent house, and it felt like a tomb. The walls seemed to press in on me, each one inscribed with the lie of my life. I went straight to my study and poured 3 fingers of whiskey, my hand shaking so badly the bottle neck chattered against the glass. I drank it in one burning gulp, but it did nothing to warm the ice that had settled in my soul. I looked at the paperweight. The cheerful, frozen smile of the snowman now seemed like a demon's grin. It wasn't a symbol of Kyle's contempt. It was a monument to his sacrifice. He had carried the weight of what he believed was my sin, my monstrous betrayal of Thomas Crow, for years. He had paid a blackmailer to protect my name, my reputation, the fragile peace of our family. And in return, what had I given him? My disappointment, my lectures about his greed, my own, petty, mirror image were designed to punish him for a cruelty that was, in its twisted way, an act of loyalty. The shame was a physical sickness. I stumbled to the bathroom and vomited, heaving until there was nothing left but acid and agony. I had spent months planning my revenge against a son who saw himself as my guardian. I had fought Jessica. I had fought in court. I had fought for money, all while believing I was the wrong party. I was the villain. I was the monster he believed me to be. But was I? As the initial, soul-crushing shock began to recede, replaced by a throbbing, hangover-like ache of despair, a sliver of clarity emerged. Riggs' story was clean. Too clean. It fit a narrative perfectly. The brilliant, corrupt father, the noble, destroyed partner, the treacherous fall guy. Life was never that neat. My memory of that time was a frantic, terrifying scramble to save my company, my employees, my family. It was chaos and fear, not some calculated master plan. I had been as much a victim of Riggs' schemes as Thomas. Hadn't I? A desperate, wild hope began to flicker. What if it was a lie? A sophisticated, long-con lie that Riggs had fed my son. Kyle, in his youth, his black and white view of the world, would have been devastated by even the suggestion of my guilt. Riggs, the consummate manipulator, could have easily fabricated proof. He could have taken my legitimate business worries, my frantic brainstorming sessions on how to save the company, and twisted them into a confession of masterminding the fraud. I had to know. I had to find out what proof Riggs had shown my son. I called Ben. It was past midnight, but he answered on the second ring, his voice thick with sleep and immediate concern. "Barry, what's wrong? Did something happen?" "I talked to Riggs," I said, my voice raw. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. "And what did he say?" I told him. I spilled the whole ugly story, the accusation, the twisted tale of my supposed guilt, the reason for Kyle's payments. The line was silent for so long, I thought we'd been disconnected. "Ben, I'm here," he said, his voice now utterly awake and grave. "Barry, you know that's not true. You know what that time was like. You were fighting for your life. But what if he has something, Ben?" I pleaded, the desperation clear in my voice. What if he showed Kyle something that looked real? A document, a recording. I have to know what it was. I have to see it. "All right," Ben said, his lawyer's mind shifting into gear. "All right. Well, find out. I'll call Anya first thing in the morning. If there's proof, she'll find it. But Barry, you need to prepare yourself. If Riggs has something, even if it's forged, it could be damaging." The next morning, Ben, Dr. Sharma, and I met in a secure conference room in her building. I recounted the conversation with Riggs again. Dr. Sharma listened, her expression unreadable. "The claim is that you were the architect of the original Evans and Crow fraud, and that your son was paying blackmail to keep this secret," she summarized, her tone clinical. "You wish to locate this alleged proof?" "Yes," I said. "Whatever he has, I need to see it." "The source would be Samuel Riggs," she said. "The most direct path is to obtain it from him. Given his current financial desperation, as evidenced by his attempted shakedown of you last night, he may be amenable to a transaction." "You want me to buy it from him?" I asked, disgusted. "It is the most efficient method," she replied. Alternatively, we can attempt a digital acquisition. If the proof is a physical document, he likely has a digital copy for insurance. We have his location. We can attempt to access his personal electronic devices. The idea of breaking into his room felt sordid, criminal, but the need to know was a fire in me. Do it, I said. Whatever it takes, Doctor. Sharma nodded. I will assemble a team. We will need a diversion to draw him and his associate away from the premises. It will be expensive. I don't care. The plan was set for that evening, Doctor. Sharma's team consisted of 2 men who looked like they could be Riggs' neighbors, nondescript, tough, and utterly silent. Their job was to create a disturbance at the Harbour Lights bar, a staged fight that would require the attention of the bartender and, hopefully, Riggs and his bodyguard. Meanwhile, a digital forensics expert would enter Riggs' room and clone the hard drive of his computer and any external storage devices. I waited with Ben and Dr. Sharma in her office, watching the clock. It was the longest 2 hours of my life. My mind raced through possibilities. A forged memo, a doctored photograph, an audio recording with my voice, spliced and edited. Finally, the forensics expert, a young woman with neon blue hair named Myla, returned. She held up a small, black external hard drive. Got it, she said, plugging it into Dr. Sharma's computer. The guy's security is a joke. Password was his dog's name. He had a laptop and this drive. I imaged both. There's a lot of junk, but there's a folder called insurance. It's encrypted, but the password was saved in his browser. My heart was in my throat. Dr. Sharma navigated to the folder. Inside, there were a handful of files. A scanned PDF of an old-looking memo, a few JPG images of handwritten notes, and 1 audio file, labeled Care Confirmation.mp3. Play the audio, I croaked. Dr. Sharma double-clicked it. The speakers hissed with low-quality ambient noise. Then a voice. Kyle's voice. He sounded young, maybe in his early 20s. His voice was strained, anguished. So it's true, all of it. Another voice, older, wheedling. Samuel Riggs. It's true, son. I'm sorry you had to find out this way. Your dad Hayes not the man you think he is. He used me. He used Thomas. He walked away clean, and we took the fall. He told me you were a liar. A criminal. I am, Kyle. I am what he made me. But Hayes the bigger criminal. Hayes the one who planned it. Here, look at this. There was a rustling of paper. See that? His handwriting. Notes on the contract. Where to hide the overruns. And this memo, it's from him to me, outlining the phantom vendor scheme. He was careful, but he wasn't perfect. There was a long silence, broken by a choked sob from Kyle. My God, all these years, he let me believe he let Thomas die. Hayes a cold man, Kyle. But you're a good kid. You don't have to be like him. You can make this right. You can help me. I'm an old man. I have nothing. A little help, now and then, and this secret. It dies with me. Your father's name stays clean. Your family stays whole. The audio file ended. The room was silent. Ben looked at me, his face a mask of pity and horror. It's a lie, I whispered, my body trembling. Those documents, they're forgeries. That conversation, he led Kyle on, he fed him that narrative. My God, he sounded so convincing. Show me the documents, I demanded. Dr. Sharma opened the PDF. It was a memo on Old Evans and Crow letterhead. It was addressed to Riggs, discussing financial reallocation procedures and mentioning the specific government contract. It was signed with the signature that was a crude, but passable, imitation of mine. That's not my signature, I said, pointing at the screen. And I never wrote that memo. She opened the JPEGs. They were photos of handwritten notes on a legal pad. The handwriting was similar to mine, discussing the Crow problem and silencing the leaks. This isn't my writing, I said, though a cold knot of doubt tightened in my stomach. The forgery was good, very good. To a grieving, confused young man, it would have looked irrefutable. He manufactured the evidence, Ben said, his voice firm with conviction. He preyed on Kyle when he was most vulnerable. My God, Barry, the sheer evil of it. And that's when I saw it. The truth. Not the truth Riggs had sold, not the truth Kyle had bought, but the real, devastating truth. It wasn't about the documents. It was about the conversation. The audio. I looked at Dr. Sharma. Play the last part of the audio again. The part where Riggs says, "You can help me." She rewound and played it. "You can help me. I'm an old man. I have nothing. A little help, now and then, and this secret. It dies with me. Your father's name stays clean. Your family stays whole." "Stop," I said. The room went quiet. Ben and Dr. Sharma looked at me. "He never explicitly states the secret," I said, my mind racing, connecting dots I hadn't seen before. "He never says the secret that Barry is a fraud. He says this secret." He lets Carl fill in the blanks. "He's a master manipulator. He never outright lies on the tape. He implies. He suggests. He lets Carl own fear and love for me do the work for him." I stood up, pacing the sterile room. "Don't you see? This wasn't a one-time con. This was a long-term operation. He didn't just show Carl forgeries and get a payout. He cultivated him. He turned my son against me. Not with a club, but with a whisper. He made Kyle his accomplice. He made him a partner in hiding the secret. He bound Kyle to him. The horror of it was complete. Riggs hadn't just stolen my money through my son, he had stolen my son. He had inserted himself into the most sacred bond of trust between a father and son and poisoned it at the root. "We have to confront him with this," Ben said. "We have the evidence of his blackmail now. This audio file, the forgeries. We can go to the police." "No," I said, a new, terrifying plan forming in my mind. The cold, calculating part of me that had crafted the mirror will was back. But it was sharper now, honed by a deeper, more personal pain. The legal system was too slow, too clumsy. Jessica and her financial fraud could be handled by the courts. Samuel Riggs, he required a different kind of justice, a poetic one. "We're not going to the police," I said, my voice low and steady. "I'm going to break him." I spent the next 48 hours in a fever dream of planning. I used the resources Anya Sharma had at her disposal. I learned everything there was to know about Samuel Riggs' life over the last 30 years. He hadn't just been in hiding, he'd been a ghost, leaving a trail of aliases and petty crimes across 3 states. He had a record for check fraud, for bar fights, for drunk and disorderly. He was a small-time grifter who had stumbled upon the score of a lifetime, my son's conscience. I also learned about his associate, the brutish man with the shaved head. His name was Vince. He was an ex-con, a leg breaker for a low-level loan shark. He was Riggs' muscle, his connection to the underworld that kept him safe. And he had a weakness, a crippling gambling debt. The pieces were all there. I just had to assemble them. I had been drafted a new document. It wasn't a will, it was a confession. In it, I detailed, in my own words, the entire story as Riggs had told it to Kyle. I admitted to being the mastermind of the Evans and Crow fraud, to framing Thomas Crow, to cutting a deal to save myself. I wrote of my overwhelming guilt, my decades of shame. I described the proof Riggs had the memo, the notes, and affirmed their authenticity. It was a complete, total, and utter fabrication, a perfect lie. Then, I arranged a meeting, not at the Harbor Lights bar, somewhere more controlled. I had Dr. Sharma rent a small, private room in a quiet, upscale hotel. I told Riggs I was ready to talk terms, but I wouldn't set foot in his world again. To my surprise, he agreed. He was confident, arrogant. He thought he had broken me. The day of the meeting, I arrived early with Ben. Dr. Sharma and her team were in the room next door, with audio and video feed running. I sat at a small table, the confession document and a pen in front of me. My heart was a trip hammer. Right on time, Riggs arrived with Vince in tow. Vince stood by the door, arms crossed, a silent, threatening presence. Riggs sat down opposite me, a smug look on his face. "So, Barry, you've come to your senses." "I have," I said, my voice flat. "I can't live with this anymore. The guilt is destroying me. You were right about everything." His eyes widened slightly, surprised by my capitulation. He leaned forward. "I knew you'd see reason. So, the payments. We said 100,000 quarterly." "You'll do better than that," I said, pushing the confession document across the table to him. "I'm an old man. I don't have many years left. I want to clear my conscience. I'm willing to sign this. A full, notarized confession to everything. With this, you don't need to rely on my payments. You can go to the media. You can sell this story. You'll be a hero, the whistleblower who finally brought down Barry Evans. You'll be set for life." Riggs' eyes lit up with an avaricious gleam I had never seen before. This was beyond his wildest dreams. Not a trickle of blackmail, but a tsunami of cash and fame. He snatched the document and began to read it, his lips moving silently. Vince, intrigued, stepped away from the door to look over his shoulder. "This is it," Riggs whispered, his voice trembling with excitement. "This is everything." "It is," I said, "but there's a condition." His eyes narrowed. "What condition?" "The originals," I said. "The memo, the handwritten notes, the audio recording you made of your conversation with Kyle. You give me all of it. The physical originals. Once I have them, I sign this. You can keep the copies, of course, but I want the originals destroyed. It's my final act of penance." I held my breath. This was the gamble. Would he be greedy enough, arrogant enough, to hand over his only real leverage? He stared at me, his mind working. I could see the calculation in his eyes. The confession in his hand was a gold mine. The originals were just the key that had unlocked it. With this signed document, he didn't need them anymore. He could have 1,000 copies made. "All right," he said, a slow, greedy smile spreading across his face. "It's a deal. Vince, go get the box. It's under the floorboards in my room." Vince looked hesitant for a moment, but a sharp nod from Riggs sent him on his way. The 20 minutes it took for him to return were the most tense of my life. When Vince came back, he was carrying a small, metal lockbox. Riggs took it, produced a key from around his neck, and opened it. Inside, nestled in yellowed tissue paper, were the documents I had seen on the computer screen, and a single, old-fashioned microcassette tape. "The audio original," Riggs said, placing the box on the table in front of me. I looked inside. I picked up the memo. The paper felt old, but that could be fate. The handwriting on the notes looked even more convincing in person. And the tape, it was the master. "The pen," I said, nodding to the document. Riggs eagerly slid it over to me. I uncapped it. My hand was steady. I signed my name with a flourish at the bottom of the confession. One then took the notary stamp that Ben had arranged and pressed it next to my signature. It was done. Riggs snatched the document back, holding it like the Holy Grail. He was practically vibrating with triumph. "I knew it," he cackled. "I knew you were weak. I knew it'd win in the end." I looked at him, and for the first time, I allowed a small, cold smile to touch my lips. "Did you, Sam? Did you really win?" The door to the adjoining room opened. Dr. Sharma walked in, holding a tablet. Behind her were two men in suits who had FBO written all over them. Riggs' smile vanished. Vince took a step back, his hand instinctively going to his waistband. "What is this?" Riggs snarled. "This," I said calmly, "is the end of the game." I picked up the metal lockbox. "You say, Sam, You just sold me the evidence of your long-running blackmail scheme against my son, Kyle Evans. The forgeries you created to extort him. The recording you made of you manipulating a grieving young man. All for the price of this. I gestured to the confession in his hand. This worthless piece of fiction, which I just signed under false pretenses, which renders it legally void. You have no leverage. You have no money. All you have are federal agents who are very interested in a case of interstate wire fraud, extortion, and witness intimidation. The color drained from Riggs' face. He looked from the confession in his hand to the lockbox in mine, to the stony-faced agents. The sheer beautiful, catastrophic understanding dawned in his eyes. He had been outmaneuvered, completely and utterly. You set me up, he whispered, his voice cracking. I held up a mirror, Sam. I said, my voice as cold as the glass on my desk, just like I did for my son. You showed my son a lie about me, and I just showed you the truth about yourself. You're not a mastermind. You're a small, pathetic, grubby little man who preys on the love between fathers and sons. And your time is up. The agents moved in, reading them their rights. Vince was cuffed without a struggle, his spirit broken. Riggs just stood there, trembling, staring at the confession in his hand as they put the handcuffs on him. The document that was supposed to be his ticket to paradise was now his boarding pass to a federal prison. As they led him away, he looked back at me, and in his eyes, I didn't see hatred. I saw the hollowed-out look of a man who has lost everything, who has been utterly and completely erased. I stood there, holding the lockbox that contained the instruments of my son's torment. The weight of it was immense, but it was not the weight of guilt. It was the weight of closure. I went home. I walked into my study. I opened the lockbox. I took out the forged memo, the fake notes, and the microcassette tape. I built a small fire in the fireplace, and one by one, I fed them to the flames. The paper blackened and curled. The tape melted, its lies forever silenced. I watched as the physical evidence of the lie that had stolen my son was reduced to ash and smoke. When it was done, I picked up the snowman paperweight. I looked at it, and for the first time, I didn't see a weapon or a monument to pain. I saw a relic, a piece of a story that was now, finally, over. I knew what I had to do. I called Clara and asked her to come over. When she arrived, her face was etched with worrying. Dad, what's going on? You've been so distant. I led her to the study and sat her down. I took a deep breath, and I told her everything. Not the lie Riggs had told, but the truth. I told her about Riggs coming back, about the blackmail, about the forgeries, about the terrible burden Kyle had carried, believing he was protecting me from a crime I didn't commit. I told her about the confrontation, about the setup, about Riggs being in federal custody. I held nothing back. She listened, her hand over her mouth, tears streaming down her face. When I finished, she was silent for a long time, processing the horrific saga. All this time, she whispered, he was trying to protect you. He thought he was saving the family. He was, I said, my own eyes stinging. In his own twisted, misguided way, he was. He loved us, Clara. He loved us so much he was willing to make a deal with the devil to keep us safe. I was so wrong about him. I thought his will was an act of contempt. It was an act of a son who believed his father was a monster and was trying to somehow balance the scales. It was wrong, but it came from a place of love. Clara got up and came over to me, wrapping her arms around me. We cried together, for the brother she lost, for the son I had misunderstood, for the years that had been stolen from us by a poisonous lie. The next day, with Clara by my side, I visited Carl's grave. It was a crisp, clear autumn day. The sun was shining. I placed the snowman paperweight at the base of his headstone. I'm sorry, son, I whispered, my hand resting on the cold granite. I'm sorry I didn't see it. I'm sorry you carried that alone. It's over now. The ghost is gone. Rest easy. As we turned to leave, Clara slipped her hand into mine. The future was still uncertain. Jessica's financial fraud case was winding its way through the courts, a lingering headache. But the sickness at the heart of our family, the infection that had festered for decades, had finally been lanced. The war of the wills was over. The battle with the ghost was won. I had lost my son, but in learning the truth of his sacrifice, I had found him again. And in the quiet that followed, surrounded by the love of my daughter, I finally began to learn how to live without the weight of the past on my shoulders. The foundation of lies had crumbled, and from the ashes, something new, something real, could finally be built.